హలో. ఈ ఇంకా పైగా.
Hello, check 1 2 3. Hello, 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 check. Hello, 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 check. Hello, hello, check. Hello, 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 check. Hello, साहब चेक कर लो साहब. हेलो, 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 चेक. ये कार्डलेस से मेन पहले ये चेक कर लो. हेलो, हेलो.
afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome on behalf of the Office of the Dean, Development and UGC Affairs OU, and Office of the Director IQAC. We invite you all to this lecture on the future of higher education, consideration for capabilities, demographics, operations, and investment over the next 20 years. We invite into our midst our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Kumar Molgaram, and the esteemed speaker for the session, Professor Edward Buckingham, Professor and Program Director, Master in Business Innovation at Monash, Indonesia. And we also welcome into our midst the Dean Development and UGC Affairs, Professor B. Lavanya ma'am, and our OSD to the Vice Chancellor, Professor S. Jitendra Kumar Naik sir. Without much ado, I request Professor B. Lavanya ma'am to introduce this meeting to us, the reason, and a short brief about our speaker. All yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir. Respected Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, OSD, sir, distinguished speaker, Professor Buckingham, respected deans, directors, principals, HODs, and one and all. I feel it as a privilege to introduce our eminent speaker today. Professor Buckingham areas of expertise are strategy, business model design, international business, and operational management. He has extensive experience as an educator in leadership and broad-level roles. His industrial interests include agribusiness, manufacturing, education, and natural resources. Professor Buckingham began his career with the Boston Consulting Group in Shanghai, where he advised multinational corporations and state-owned enterprises. After completing his MBA at INSEAD, he ran the French manufacturing subsidiaries at Suez Chemie, which specialized in pharmaceutical and medical device packaging. As a manager at various institutions, business consulting, Sir advised national and international oil companies on their exploration and production strategies in many places of the countries like Russia, Gabon, Pakistan, France, and the UK. Prior to joining the Boston Consulting Group, Professor Buckingham completed a postgraduate program at the Johns Hopkins Nanjing Center. His PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, focused on organizational boundaries and business strategy in Indonesia. Professor Buckingham graduated with a BSc in Material Science and a BA in Honours in Indonesian Literature from Monash Universities, and he found his Monash education valuable at every step of his career. So we can understand, this is just a brief resume from where we can understand his sir is a multifaceted personalities with multi-disciplines taken at his graduation level and the PG level. All this is just a tip of an iceberg. And we are very fortunate that for the last 2 days, we had a series of distinguished lectures at various colleges of the universities like University College of Commerce, University College of Engineering, Technology, Science, and also University College of Arts and Social Sciences. We could understand from all these lectures that for a business model innovator, leadership and vision are very important, because all these lectures were exclusively given to the students, where we can understand that to succeed as a business model innovator, one should have a balance between creativity with practicality, which means to say that one should constantly align with different kinds of innovation. For this, we require a mindset of continuous and constant learning, experimentation, and also adaptation. And we also should know that innovation is not just about changing what is offered, but innovation is something which is very important, where we have to reshape ourselves, and we should see that the talents are exhibited and captured. So thank you very much, sir, for all these enlightening lectures, and the scholars and students could learn many things from these lectures. And today we are going to listen about the future of higher education, consideration for capabilities, demographies, operations, and investments over the next 20 years. So we are very anxiously waiting to listen to you, sir. Before that, I request Patrick, sir, to conduct the remaining proceedings. Thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that introduction and introducing the speaker to us. May I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Kumar, sir, to speak a few words on this occasion. And let me tell, sir was one of the members who has attended this prestigious LEAP leadership program. Just sharing that there were a few vice chancellors who were produced out of this leadership program, and one of it is our sir. Yes, as I take yours.
Very good afternoon. Today's chief guest, Professor Edward from Monash University, OSD to Vice Chancellor, Professor Jitendra Kumar Naik, and Dean UGC, Professor B. Lavanya, and principals of various colleges, deans of various faculties, heads of the departments, administrative officers of various offices located in the Osmania University. At the outset, I appreciate Dean Development and UGC Affairs, Osmania University, for hosting this particular 2 hours program, awareness program on the future of higher education, consideration for capabilities, demographics, operations and investment over the next 20 years. Of course, our government's also looking forward in this direction. Time to time, they're asking, the perspective plan for the 1 year and perspective plan for the 5 years. And in couple of days, we are planning to meet even Chief Minister to present our perspective plan for the next 5 years. We already prepared, and recently we conducted one meeting with the principals. And the principals, they presented 1 year perspective plan and 5 years perspective plan, and regarding this academic and research, and at the same time, the innovation and infrastructure creation. We focused on these aspects and the future challenges, other challenges. So all the campus college principals and Constance college principals, they presented 4 slides. With the 4 slides, 5 minutes maximum, and even the directors of various centers also they presented, and what is required for the next 5 years. So based on that, we prepared 7 to 8 pages of comprehensive report and 15 slides of presentation covering entire the expectations of the government. We sent, and the same thing we are going to present in the couple of days at the government chief minister, interaction with the chief minister, right? So in this context, luckily, Professor Edward also is visiting India. Just he sent a email to me regarding his visit. I requested him to at least to spare 2-3 days at Osmania City. So he accepted my request, and he delivered 4-5 lectures with especially the students, interaction with the students, and he motivated a lot. Topics already just given to the students and principals, just 3-4 days back, right? And accordingly, he completed all the programs at various colleges, and now this is the final program. Tomorrow he is leaving, and definitely his lecture will be enjoyed by each and everyone. And the LEAP program is the highest level program organized by the Government of India, MHRD, Leadership Excellence in Academicians program. And only 3 or 4 programs conducted by the Government of India. Each state, 1 person selected. So luckily, from Osmania University, myself and the former Vice Chancellor, Professor Ravinder, we got the opportunity. Right? Hyderabad Central University, the host university, we spent 7 to 8 days at Monash University, Australia. He was the coordinator for that entire program. And because of, the Monash University and University of Hyderabad and Government of India, almost, more than 12 faculty members became Vice Chancellors. And even the Government of India, especially while selection of the IIT directors and NIT directors and IIIT directors, there is one column. So are you LEAP, do you have LEAP certificate like that? So when schedule everything they are asking. So 2-3 boxes are there in the application itself. So you can understand the importance of the LEAP program and how they actually trained, how to become, future leaders, right? So because of that training result, I think today I am here because of that particular LEAP program. So I hope if any such kind of opportunity comes, all of you please attend such kind of programs and make use of such kind of wonderful programs for the betterment of the universities and higher education in general. So I hope lecture I won't take much time because it will take almost 2 to 3 hours continuously. and you'll enjoy. Definitely, I'm sure his lecture will be very, very excellent, right? So thank you very much for your kind presence here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for expressing that attitude of gratitude that you're an outcome of the program that you attended at Monash and at Central University, Hyderabad. Now I think we would leave everything to Professor Edward to continue. May I request the members on the dais to occupy the chairs in front there. They will help you out, sir. I asked Professor Edward, do you have a PowerPoint? He said, I don't need slides there. So I would use the marker board. So as the saying goes, power is in the person making the point and not in the PowerPoint. So he would be using the marker board there. Yeah. For a moment, I seen him a little while ago. I said you resemble a lot Prince Charles in UK. You're the person there.
Thank you for having me here today. Huge honor. And Professor Kumar, what an honor it is to be able to come back here, back to Hyderabad. That might be better. It's a pleasure to come back to Hyderabad. I first came here in 2001 with my wife, with my newly married wife. And we had no children, and we visited Hyderabad, and the guidebook said, go to Hyderabad, eat biryani, and go to Golconda Fort. What we did, and we had a wonderful time. During those months traveling in India, we learnt an awful lot about your country. I've always been interested in India since I was a small boy because my family lived in India many, many years ago. And in fact, I'm looking at all the photographs that you have here. You have poets. You have Mr. Raman of Raman Spectroscopy, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the other names I don't know. Mother Teresa I obviously know. But the one I wanted to draw that caught my attention when I came here is that you have Rudyard Kipling, who I think it is fair to say is Indian in many respects. Rudyard Kipling went to school in the village where I was born in England. So in a funny sort of a way, I come here and I see the connection. When Professor Kumar came to Australia with his colleagues, we designed a program that was based on the principle of autonomous learning. And this is really what I want to talk to you about today. Autonomous learning, student-centric learning. And although I did some work, most of the work on the program was done by the participants. I provided them with some basic methodologies to do research on the campus, and I provided them with a rhetorical structure to present their findings at the end of the week, which they did. And they were excellent. Professor Kumar has very graciously returned the favor for me this week. I've come to your campus, and he's made it possible for me to interact with all of the different faculties, so science, with engineering, with the business school, with the arts faculty, with technology. I have done this each day. You have given me your students. What an honor. And I have enjoyed them, every one of them. Each of them have fantastic capabilities. In the evenings, or in the very early mornings, I have been for a run around the campus. So I have explored all the different nooks and crannies. And that has been a lot of fun as well. You are very lucky. You have a huge area that you occupy. You have an incredible history. Born before independence, structured around this idea of creating knowledge for people, empowering people, these are very much the philosophies that drive the university movement. And I say movement because universities have been the engine for economic development the world over. What we think of as a university today is very different to what a university was 500 years ago or 600 years ago, where it was mostly about studying religion, right? Which was very important and is very important. It's a foundation for society. But universities today, they play a different role. They play a different role in society. We are more advanced. And so before I get started on talking about the future of higher education, I just want to frame for you a little bit how we might think about growth. There are many economic models to talk about growth, but I want to give you one that I use a lot in my classes and that I think will help us as we think through the problem together today. So if you think about economic growth, there are three drivers, principally, of economic growth. The first driver is the most primitive. It's called population. And we all know how to do that, don't we? So when you're young, you find somebody of the opposite gender, you have shelter, you have food, and if everything goes well, 9 months later or a year later, you have a choti laki, right? You have a small baby comes along. And the population grows. Historically, this was really the only way to grow the economy. The bigger the population, the more powerful the king. So we farmed, we invaded one another, we added territory, and we got bigger and bigger. Indian history is like that, European history is like that, Chinese history is like that. It principally focused on this idea of growing population. But there are other drivers to economic growth. The second one that I'd like to talk about is this idea of specialization. Now, Adam Smith described this as division of labor. So everybody has a task, everybody performs that task, and they do it to a high level. They do it to a high level of capability where they enjoy both economies of scale but also experience effects. So you get better and better at teaching. Do you remember when you first taught at university? It was terrifying, right? And now you do it quite easily. These two drivers are what have driven us, our economic growth, over the last 2 or 3 centuries. The first, population increase. The second is specialization, or the division of labor, brought about and amplified by the Industrial Revolution. And there have been good things about this, and there have been bad things about this. There's a third driver. And this driver, we can call it investment. So this is the notion that when an economy grows, you get surpluses, and then you invest those surpluses either to grow the population or to raise human capital, right? To raise human capital. We do research, we invent new products, we invent new markets, we develop new ways of structuring the economy. We innovate. We invest in order to innovate. So there you go. You've got three ways of thinking about the economy. Now, in the early 21st century, we had, over the previous 100 years, we had grown the population. And India gets a big star for that. Your population really grew. We had division of labor, we had specialization that was amplified through free trade. So India, particularly after the late Professor Manmohan Singh, liberalized its markets, facilitating foreign trade, but also facilitating the trade in services. Right? our information technology is getting better and better, we find that global growth, particularly in the last few years, has begun to stagnate. And so this raises an interesting problem for universities, because if we are engines for growth, what is it that we need to change about the way that we operate in order to restore the improvements that we were making over the last 100 years? And that's really what I want to talk about with you today. What should universities be doing differently that enables us to grow more effectively in the years ahead? So I'm going to start by thinking through the problem and how different universities have responded. The first response has been to seek economies of scale. So it's become very common for universities to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And my university, Monash University, is an example of this. We merged with other universities, we swallowed them up, a bit like a feudal king 1,000 years ago. They merge other states, they bring them together. Same idea. So it was really a population game. It was about raising economies of scale. We built big buildings. We invested in research and development. And we invested in teaching and learning. But nevertheless, there is a sense in very big universities that maybe things are not running quite as well as they should do. Do you have this feeling too in India? Yeah? You do a bit. Maybe it's too administrative now. You have to fill in lots of forms. There's lots of that needs to be done. There's not only reports that need to be written, but you have your teaching responsibility, you have your research responsibility. And as time goes by, a lot of pressure builds up on the faculty. And the challenge of university leaders is, how do we manage that pressure in a way that enables faculty and students to continue to develop, to be high performing? So at about the same time that we started seeking economies of scale, a movement appeared, at least in Western universities, of this idea which we call the university enterprise, or the enterprise university. That we should start running universities in the same way that we run corporations. And so we professionalized the administration within the universities. We brought in professional managers. And to a certain extent, I was part of that movement, because before I became a professor, I was a university administrator. Do you want me to use a different microphone? Do you want me to take it? If you give me a hand mic. There we go. Is that better? Hopefully a little bit better. Anyway, so I became a university administrator. And I remember I had moved from manufacturing. And the chief financial officer turned to me and said at the end of the first day, "What do you think of our university?" And I said to him, I think it could be a lot more efficient. And he looked at me and he said, "Edward, if we could just get rid of the faculty and the students, we would have a beautiful business. But it doesn't work that way in a university. You have people." Now, in manufacturing, the means of production is very simple. providing you maintain the machines and you give them electricity and you give them water, they operate 24/7. But in a university, it's very different. In a university, the means of production is highly intelligent. The means of production is highly educated. The means of production, you, the faculty, are highly articulate. And so it requires a different sort of management style. It requires a different approach to what you might see in industry. Last year, I had the good fortune of meeting one of the world's leading university management scholars. And I asked him about his book that he'd written 10 years ago. It was called The Enterprise University. I asked him about it. I said, is there anything that you would change in the book? And he said, no, I don't think so, but I would probably add one more chapter about change in the university. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, very often when we become deans or head of departments or principals, in the case of Osmania University, we have a strategy that we pursue. So we take resources from somewhere else and we invest in that strategy. It means that we have to cut in one place in order to invest somewhere else. And when we do that, we make some people very happy and other people very angry. Talking about? It's a difficult job leading a university. It's very difficult because your budget is finite, particularly in India if you're a state university. If you're an IIT, well, it's a bit different, isn't it? You can ask the federal government, you can ask the Birla Group, you can ask Tata. But if you're a state university, as you are a state university, resources are constrained. So it's very difficult to be a leader in a state university because you have to change your strategy in order to meet the situation, to meet the demand, but your resources are limited. Oh, and by the way, you have lots of buildings, all of which need to be painted, renewed, restored, improved. Isn't this right? So it's a really tough place to operate. If you're in a manufacturing company, if you don't fix a machine, it just stops working. If you're running a university, if you don't repair the faculty building, well, the academics get upset, but then the students have a demonstration. Is that right? Do you have active students on campus? I think you do. I think I saw a protest while I was here. Very interesting to see. So fundamentally, leadership in a university is far more complex than it is in most private sector organizations. There's another complication as well. The Vice-Chancellor does not own the university. In a business, if I own the business, my word is the law. What I say goes. And I will own this business until I die. So everybody accepts that I am the indisputed leader. I am the, can I say, Maharaja? I'm the number one. But in a university, it's not like that. Because even when you lead a university, you are leading your colleagues. You are leading your colleagues. So this is a very complex, a very nuanced situation that you confront. And whilst this is true for the Vice-Chancellor, it is also true for the principals. It is also true for the deans. It is also true for the heads of department. It is also true for the research labs. You have to manage your peers, and this is complicated. Now, stepping forward, what this means is that you require a different style of leadership. You require a different style of leadership. What it means is, particularly in an environment where the context is changing, you need very much, if your life is to be a good life, you need to change the culture of your organization from being problem-centric to solution-centric. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let me explain. when we go to university, we go on a journey towards autonomous learning. At high school, at primary school, we memorize, we learn the grammar, we learn vocabulary, we do arithmetic. We follow rules, we learn the rules of the game. As you finish high school, you begin to become analytical. When you go to university, you become even more analytical. And that's fine, because you identify where the problems are. But there's another step, and that is becoming solution-centric. So identify the problems, but then offer a solution. Now what's difficult about this is that sometimes you will offer a solution and nobody wants to take it on. You have to be humble in this sense. You have to be humble. If you're going to be a good member of the community, you offer the solutions to the leadership. And then the leadership, what that does for the leadership is that it gives the leadership strategic options. It means that they have lots of solutions to choose from in order to solve the problems that they face. And as I said earlier, the leadership in a university is surrounded by problems. Surrounded by problems. So if the faculty step forward with solutions, and they're thinking about their colleagues, so the solutions are good solutions, then what you do is you create a market of ideas, a market of solutions. When you have a market of solutions, it means that you are not just relying on the grey matter in the head of the Vice-Chancellor or the head of the Dean, but you are relying on the collective capabilities of the organization. And if you can achieve that, it is transformational. It is transformational for two reasons. One, you learn to run the organization within your means, which means you become more efficient, but also you become more effective. And if you do this well, your students also absorb this culture. And what we're really talking about here is culture, a culture of a university. This is in fact the most valuable thing that a university can offer society. Yes, knowledge is important, but stop for a minute. Think about the knowledge that you teach every day. In the physics faculty, fundamentally in physics, do you teach anything that we don't teach at Monash? I doubt it. In the literature department, do you teach anything in literature that we don't teach at Oxford? No. Maybe one thing. Telugu literature. Maybe that's only taught here. So you have an advantage. Don't forget that. You always have a local advantage. The thing about knowledge is that it is a commodity. It didn't used to be a commodity. 500 years ago, if you owned a book, you were a very wealthy person, right? Only rich people owned books. Even 100 years ago, only rich people owned books. These days, we have so much knowledge, so much information, we can't consume it, right? Knowledge has become an absolute commodity. And so once again, you need to ask yourself, what is the role of a university in this environment, which is so different to the environment that we were experiencing 100 years ago? Well, tell me, stop for a minute. What makes Osmania different from Monash? What makes Osmania different from Harvard University or Yale University or any other university for that matter? And I would argue it is your culture. It is your ability to process knowledge, to discover value in knowledge in the environment that you're in, which is Telangana State. So a lot of the time, universities go through this silly process of rankings. You know, we're always talking about rankings. Rankings are useful to a point, but they should not determine your strategy. Your strategy is to raise the performance of the society in which you are in. By creating a culture and setting an example that creates clusters of industry and enterprise and culture and literature and film and television and arts all around the university. That in fact is your true purpose. It's not to be number one in the Times Higher Education survey. And I say this because when I was at INSEAD, the EMBA programs that I ran, they went to number one in the Financial Times. And I felt good about it for 2 days, maximum. After that, it was business as usual. But if you create a program or if you create a university that is generating human capital, every time you step out the gate and you see a business that's spun out of Osmania University, or you hear a song that's been composed by somebody from your music department, or you read a piece of literature that's been produced by one of your graduates, well, as a teacher, that is what would give me satisfaction. That is what would prove the purpose of the university that I'm in. Now we need to pause for a moment and say this is all very well, but the economy has changed. Communication costs now are a lot lower than they were 30 years ago. Professor Kumar will remember me asking this question. I know that you have the answer to it, so I'm going to ask you. Can you remember your parents telling you when you were on the phone, "Get off the phone"? Can you remember that? Get off the phone! Now, why did they say that to you? This is 1980s, 1990s, yeah? Because using a telephone was expensive. Even if you were calling the next village, you paid 50 rupees a minute. I don't know what you paid in India. Maybe it was 100 rupees. Maybe it was 500 rupees to call London or somewhere else. Get off the phone! So much so is this memory etched on my mind. When I was 16, I left Australia and I went to live in a village in Malaysia. A simple village people. Nobody spoke English. So I learned to speak Malay. Bahasa Melayu. Basha, I think, means language in Hindi. So this is a meja. Mej. Yeah? That is a kursi. Yeah? This is a kamis. Kamis, yeah? So I learned these words. I learned this language. I learned about Islam. I learned all these different things. I got outside my comfort zone for a while. Now, in the house, we had a telephone. We were very lucky. And when I came into the house, there was one thing I noticed. The telephone was locked. And only my host father had the key. It was an interesting kind of lock because people could telephone you, but you couldn't telephone them. Very effective, very effective. As a result, living in this house, we all talked to one another all the time. So I learned Malay very quickly, always talking to one another. Very interactive. But today, as I was saying in the arts faculty, where are my colleagues from the arts faculty this morning? As I said in the arts faculty, now it's quite possible to go into a family home and nobody is talking to anybody. They're all on their phone. And what is tragic about this is that most of the time there is knowledge coming in, but there is nothing coming out. I love it because you have such a sick sense of humor. It's good. It's good. We call this gallows humor in English. We laugh about it because it's terrible. It is absolutely terrible. And I am guilty as well. spend too much time on my phone, far too much time. So what is this doing? There's a lot of anxiety at the moment because we have a new president in the United States called Elon Musk. A new president, he's called Elon Musk, correct? Right? And so we're worried that Elon Musk is not a real person. In fact, he might not be. He might just be an AI bot, right? Feeding us on Twitter and Meta and Facebook and all the rest of it. Training our young people to receive information, but not to articulate arguments. To receive instructions, but not to articulate solutions. So there is a battle that has started, and it starts with every industrial revolution. Every industrial revolution demands that we rediscover our humanity in the face of new technology. This was true. You experienced it firsthand in India with colonialism. This was the Industrial Revolution arriving here, completely challenging the traditional capabilities of Indian society. Now that's all gone. But a new Industrial Revolution is starting. And the organizations that are at the forefront of interpreting and of commanding this technology are universities. This is your role going forward. It is to train the next generation how to use this technology for empowerment, this is part of your motto, rather than disempowerment. And a big part of that, as I said earlier, is about solution-centric thinking. Now I'm going to stop for a moment and change direction a little bit. About 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, a friend of mine, no, it was actually 14 years ago, a friend of mine founded a company in India that became very successful, very, very successful. It became a unicorn. That company's name is Eruditus. Do you know the company Eruditus? Some of you know. I always get confused when Indians do this. Is that yes or no? You know, this is what I call the Indian secret weapon in negotiations. Because every time you do that to a foreigner, they get stuck, they freeze, and they say to themselves, how do I respond? So yes or no, have you heard of the company Eruditus? Yes, some of you have heard of it, right? It was founded by two people, two Indians, one called Ashwin, and the other one called Chaitanya. So Chait is a friend of mine. And he called me up. He said, Edo, would you be interested in doing some work for us? I said, of course. If you pay me, yes. What would you like me to do? He said, we've come up with a new business model that is going to revolutionize higher education, and particularly education for executives. I said, tell me, I'm really interested. Tell me how this is going to work. He said, in the higher education market, we believe there are supply and demand imbalances. There are some institutions that everybody wants to get into. For example, the IITs in India. 200,000 people apply and 1,000 people get in. Something like that. Some incredible statistic. They don't charge very much. I think is it 8 lakh for a degree at the IIT? That's pretty good value. That's pretty. I would like to go to an IIT for 8 lakh. I think that's. I should apply. I should have gone to an IIT. Saved my parents a lot of money. Then there are other institutions like Harvard and Yale and Princeton. Everybody wants to get in, but they charge, is it 1 crore or 2? I always get confused. Anyway, they charge lots of crores to graduate. So there's a supply and demand imbalance. There's a premium end of the market that even though it's expensive, people still want to apply to get in. If you look in the United States, they have these very premium institutions, and then it drops. And if you don't get into those top institutions, you go to a community college. In fact, the other president, Donald Trump, has just come up with this idea of the American Academy. It's all going to be online. It's actually quite a good idea, I think. It's a recognition, in fact, and it was the recognition that Chait and Ashwin had 10, 15 years ago, that in fact a lot of education can be delivered digitally, quite effectively. But what was clever about what they did was they then approached universities in India that people wanted to go to but couldn't get into. And they offered a digital diploma or whatever from, maybe it was an IIT. You didn't have to pay very much to go on it, maybe 1 lakh, and you could do a whole course. This is what we call basically online learning. This was the beginning of the online learning revolution. But then they did something else that was, I thought, very clever. They left India. They approached the Ivy League universities in the United States. They approached the top business schools, including my old business school, INSEAD. And they said, design for us an online course that we can scale for you. We can scale at huge volume. And the people that take that course, if they get an A, they will have a pathway to come to INSEAD. Or they'll have a pathway to go to Kellogg or MIT or one of the other universities. Now, what that does, which is so clever, is it means that the students that are coming into the program, not only are they clever, but they are prepared. They have already been pre-selected. Now, most universities the world over, everybody takes an exam at the end of year 12, and you get 98, or you get 58, or you get 23. You get some score. And that gives you a currency that enables you to get access to Osmania University, the University of Hyderabad, IIT Madras, you know, all these different institutions. But that market is actually quite inefficient. If you get 100 but you only need 90, 10 points of your currency is not used, right? Also, a lot of young people, they don't really know what they want. They're not really ready for autonomous learning yet. And so what Ashwin and Chait did that was so clever was they provided student-centric learning. They provided students with an opportunity. Again, they were not high school students. They were much older. They were people who were already in the workforce. They provided them with an opportunity, mostly through their own effort, because this is a digital system, right? A digital system means low marginal costs. It means not lots of faculty teaching. Gave them a digital system that enabled them to raise their capabilities. But furthermore, it gave them a second opportunity to prove to an institution that they were good enough to study there. Now, this is really interesting because very often when you go through a selection process, it is not 100% efficient. Very often it is inefficient. How many friends can you remember from school who were super clever, super smart, but for some reason something went wrong before their final exams and they didn't get the grades that they should have got? Can you remember this? You've all had this. In fact, on a daily basis, many of you have to deal with this at the university. You have clever students, they come in and they fail one of your courses. And then you have to do remedial work. Now, what happens if you waste those students? you are actually wasting human capital from society. So by establishing a new channel, a different channel to the channels that we had previously, what it enables us to do is it enables us to recycle human capital. It also enables us to optimize the learning vis-a-vis the maturity of the student. Some students, when they're 17 or 18, they're not ready to take exams. They're not ready to go to university. But when they're 21, 22, they are ready. But we don't actually have good mechanisms for dealing with this. So I'm not saying that this is how you should run your business. What I'm saying is that the world of higher education is finding new ways to operate. This is the operations part of this. To operate in a more efficient manner. To manage the human capital that is attracted to the university in a more efficient fashion. It also means that when students come to your classes, they are already much better prepared. So for example, my father, he used to teach electrical engineering, electronics. And he taught to students that were already mature age, who wanted to learn, who were ready to learn, who had already done some online training before coming to class. It's a completely different learning experience. The efficiency of the teaching is vastly more effective. Now again, I'm not telling you to change your business model. I'm just saying this is the new model that is coming down the track. Before I came to India this time, I signed up to Duolingo. Do you know Duolingo? You've heard of Duolingo? It's an online app that teaches you foreign languages. And so I signed up to Hindi. I have been doing Duolingo now for 320 days. And my Hindi is still really bad. But I now have a foundation. And when people speak, I'm beginning to understand. So there's a similar sort of thing that's happening for other areas, for other disciplines. Now, if this works, not quite. I think I'm going to manage this. Right. Ooh. So if you think about this in terms of what this means, if this is the number of, sorry, how do I get, no, so this is the, we'll call this the price point. This is the cost per student. Cost per student. Okay? And this is the number of students. So if we were to think about this in terms of premium market globally, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Kellogg, all the big universities, they look like this. There's a whole bunch of them up here, very expensive. Mostly in America, but in other countries as well. Maybe in India there's a university called Ashoka. Yeah, high-end, expensive. And then you have the big state universities in America. They might look like that. They're bigger, they're less expensive. Maybe Monash is here, right? And then we go down and we have maybe the IITs or whatever. Anyway, the point is that there are steps. And then we have the digital. This is the digital space. This is digital online. Now what is happening? What is happening is that in the past everybody is trying to get into this one. If they can't get into this one, they go into that one. If they can't get into that one, they get into this one, right? Now, the future that is coming, thanks to eruditus, is that you start here. And you don't go through a traditional market. if you've done well in here, then you transfer to here after you've already got a foundation. Now what does that mean? Or maybe you go from here to there, or from here to there, or from here to here. Whatever way you think about it, what it means is that this digital space is like a trampoline. Do you know what I mean by a trampoline? It's a bouncing mechanism that is moving people into these other spaces, which means that the type of students that you have going forward are going to be very different to what they were in the past. They're going to have changed expectations. So we've talked about efficiency, we've talked about the cost structure. I think it's only natural for us now to talk a little bit about investment. Because historically in a university, a lot of the costs were associated with employing faculty. Faculty are expensive. Whenever we had any excess money, we built new buildings. We built labs. Associated with that is a lot of OPEX, or operational expenditure. And I can see that our leaders here, this is probably one of the biggest issues that they face. How do they maintain the operational expenditure in an environment where these figures are only going up because of inflation? And part of that answer lies with new models of teaching. But also, this creates problems for us, because if people have a different cost structure to us, it puts pressure on us to lower costs as well. And so we're going to see a lot of universities in the years ahead that are going to be thinking to themselves, why did I build all those extra buildings? Because they're not full. Now in India, this is probably not going to happen for quite some time, because you have a major demographic dividend. What is the average age in India at the moment? About 26? The average age of the population, is it 26 or 27? Right? 25 years. So 35. Oh, I think you're younger than that. You look younger than that. You look younger than that. In Australia, it's about 38, 40. In Japan, it's maybe 50. In China, it's 40, but the population is aging very quickly. So I'm going to stop for a moment and talk about China. Back in 2004, the government made a very big, important decision. They decided that China was going to become a knowledge economy. Very natural thing to do for an economy that is growing as fast as it did. So what did they do? They did what they're really good at doing in China, what they're excellent at doing in China. They built lots of new infrastructure, including universities. But today, 20 years on, the young population is contracting. And because most of the higher education system is not taught in English, it is very hard to attract sufficient volumes of foreign students in order to maintain the capacity utilization of their universities. So the higher education system in China, although China is doing very well on many fronts, it is under a huge amount of pressure. So what's going to be interesting in India is that over the next 20 years, you're going to have more and more demand for higher education, which will encourage you to build. And then the population is going to start, it's hard to believe, but the population will actually start to go down after that, in which case you're going to have excess capacity. So the question that I put to you, given what I said to you earlier about competition from online learning, new ways of doing things, new needs in the economy, when you make your decisions about investment going forward, how are you going to integrate the new technology and the fact that you're going to have a population surge of young people, and then, as sure as night follows day, you're going to have a reduction. And part of that answer lies in the business model that eruditus has brought about, the way in which they have combined online learning, digital learning, with face-to-face learning. What that means in the classroom is that professors and lecturers are going to move far away from professor-centric learning or teacher-centric learning and more towards student-centric learning. The lectures you can pre-record, you can have them online. You've seen many universities doing this already. And when they come to class, students will expect to be in tutorials. They will expect to argue with one another. They will expect to argue with professors. They will expect to experiment with one another. Now, how do you cope with that? How do you cope with that? It requires, again, a big cultural change in the way the university operates. But there's one other thing I learned this week while I was interacting with your students. And this is not a criticism, it's just an observation. The students that were final year or master's degree, they were much more responsive to question and answer sessions that I led with them. But the students, and there was one particular faculty, I'm not going to name the faculty, there was one particular faculty where the students had only just finished high school. In fact, I think they might have even been mid-year entry. And that I found it very difficult teaching those students. I found it very difficult. Because my interpretation is that they had come out of high schools in regional Telangana, in towns and villages, and they were not used to faculty asking them questions. They were not used to debate. They were not used to standing up and speaking in class in English. Right? They probably could have done it if I spoke Telangana. Telugu, sorry, if I spoke Telugu. But they were not used to doing it in English. So, again, just as I was pointing out earlier, in order for your university, in order for universities to move ahead, it's critically important to pay attention to what is happening in the secondary schools, because the secondary schools, that is where the raw material, where the human capital that is going to join you, that is where it is growing from, that is where it is emerging. Just keep a quick eye on the time. I think it's probably time for questions, because we've been going for an hour, and I look forward to trying to answer whatever questions you have. Thank you. I can take. This gentleman here had a question, I think. No, you didn't? No.
Can we use BCG matrix in our higher education?
So,
Like we have the 4 stages, which stage we can apply?
you wanted to ask a question about the BCG matrix.
Yes.
How can you use the BCG matrix? All right. So, just to explain what the BCG matrix is, because not everybody will know about it. So, the origin of the BCG matrix was this idea that if you increase the volume, you get economies of scale. And that is a fairly mechanical process. But the second idea was that the more experienced you get at doing something, the more efficient you become. So it's not about volume, it's about just becoming more experienced. So what BCG decided was there was something about market share. If you have high market share and high growth, then that means that you acquire more experience and your company moves into a position of strategic ascendancy. So if you were to look at the incumbent universities that we have, like Monash or Osmania, you have high market share, but you have low growth, all right? This is what they call a cash cow. although the Vice Chancellor might feel that there's not enough cash, right? Fair enough. But this is what they call a cash cow. And a cash cow has a life cycle. It lasts only for so long. And then after a while, it dies. So what BCG went about doing was to say to people, look at your business, look at your commercial activities as a portfolio of businesses where there is a cash cow, but there are other businesses which have small market share, but they have high growth. So the digital example of Eruditus is a great example of that. They started with small market share, but high growth. And if you manage that effectively, then what happens is it cannibalizes, or it may cannibalize, what was previously the cash cow. And then this becomes the new business model. So if you were to apply this thinking to Osmania, nobody has asked me to, but if we were going to try and think about it in terms of a university, I would look at what Monash has tried to do recently. We are a bricks and mortar comprehensive research university. We're very good at what we do. We are top 50 worldwide. But we have seen all this digital disruption coming. So what have we done? We have partnered with private companies who are active in the online space, and the attempt is to create a new business that is high growth and high market share. But there's a problem. This is a problem that we have that you don't have. Our problem is the English language. Because as soon as you do online learning in English, you are competing against everybody. And because communication costs are so low, it means that when New York University offers an MBA program online, it competes with our MBA program online. Whereas if you offered an MBA program in Telugu, how many competitors are you going to have? Very few. And I will go a step further. Imagine that it is not just pure Telugu. Let's just imagine that it is English as well, but it has just enough Telugu in it that people in your state will be comfortable doing it, but New York University can't offer anything similar. This brings me to another very important point. When you go to university, you go for three, if you can remember this far back, you went to university for three reasons. You went to learn something, which you can do online, but you also went to university to meet people. You can meet people online, but they're not necessarily the kind of people that you want to invite back to your home, right? There is a huge amount of value associated with being on campus, experiencing the on-campus environment. Many of us think that students come to campus because of us, the professors. It's not true. Students come to campus because they want to meet other students. So providing, we come back to this question of culture again, providing you can establish a culture on campus that makes students feel comfortable, they can interact, they stop looking at their phones, then you also have a competitive advantage versus the online. The question though is, how do you mix the two? So that, as you said, you have a high growth, high market share operation. That's really what we should be striving for, because that's the kind of business model that will manage the transition that comes with this new technology. It's a great question. I thought you were going to ask a question, but you just wanted a water bottle. Thank you.
So good afternoon. I'm Dr. Pender from Department of Physics. So if you look around the corners of the building, we found Venki Ramakrishna, Nobel laureate in chemistry,
Yep.
2012. Unfortunately, not from India. And Hargobind Khurana, Nobel laureate from US.
Yep.
Fortunately India, but did dedicate the prize to India. And not only that, Chandrasekhar is a Nobel laureate from astronomy. He also got a Nobel Prize from the US.
That's right.
So we are continuously losing the Indian talent.
Ah,
So how are you, suggesting the government or leaders of academics of both state and country to retain these talents?
this is a fantastic question. Fantastic question. So if we count up the number here, this is like a football match, isn't it? Because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many went overseas? 4? 4 or 5 went overseas. And then you got Maria Theresa, she came here. Rudyard Kipling, he came here. He went back again afterwards. So what you're saying is that there's an imbalance. There is an imbalance. And this morning when I was in the arts faculty, I was asked by someone, are there good jobs for librarians from Osmania in Australia? And my response was, there are many jobs for librarians in Australia, but Australian librarians will always be asked first. And then I said, why would you want to go to Australia? India is where all the action is going to be in the next 20 years. If I was 23 now, if I could just swap and be 23, I would be not going to China, I'd be coming to India. Because I think there's going to be many opportunities here. Let me play this back to you. When I moved to China in 1994, I was 23. And I had a very good time in China. I got a lot of valuable experience. I made a good amount of money. I was happy. I wasn't super rich, but I did well. And I can remember a conversation with my colleagues at BCG. And the question was, is it better to leave China and go and work in the United States? Or is it better to stay in China? And one of the older colleagues responded, if you want to go to America and lead a good life and drive a nice car and all the rest of it, clean roads and all the rest of it, then go to America. But if you want to start a business, don't go to America. Stay in China. Because this is where the growth is going to be. And he was absolutely right. Those colleagues of mine who stayed in China, who were Chinese, who stayed in China, they did extremely well. So, I hear a lot of young Indian people talking about going overseas. But I look at a city like, particularly a city like Hyderabad, and I think to myself, why would you? If I lived in Delhi, I would go anywhere to get out of Delhi with the pollution and the traffic jams and everything. I would go anywhere. But a city like Hyderabad, I don't know why I would leave. Now, back to more specifically to your question. Global talent will always be mobile. And global talent will go where they can shine the brightest. And this was the case in the last 100 years or so. You go to America, because they've got the resources, they've got the investment, they've got the rest of it. But my sense is that the differences between what you can get in America and what you can get in other countries, it's starting to shift. It's starting to change. So I think if we had this discussion again in another 20 or 30 years, maybe there'll be another 8 pictures on the wall. But like a tiger, India will roar. I said the same thing when I was last in China. China went through, and this is worth talking about. If you look at GDP per capita growth in the United States from 1870 until today, the average GDP per capita growth rate, so this is for individuals, is 1.8%. It is a straight line. There's a bit of a bubble with the Depression and World War I or World War II. and a bit with COVID. But generally speaking, every year it grows by about 2%. So the question I always ask people is, if the Americans can only do 1.8%, how is it that the Chinese and the Indians can always do more than 5%? They must be so much better. Well, it's not entirely true, because there's two different types of innovation. There's what we call low-cost innovation and there's high-cost innovation. Low-cost innovation occurs when you basically close your economy and you copy technology which exists in other economies in a protected environment, and you just tweak it in order to suit the local conditions. So the car industry in India is a great example of that, right? You take technology from other countries, you bring it into India, you adapt it, but essentially it is the same technology. And that's what China did for most of the last 4 decades. Most of their growth came through low-cost innovation. High-cost innovation is different. High-cost innovation occurs when there is no more low-cost innovation to do. So a great example of this is Japan. Japan, up until about 1990, took technology that already existed in other countries, took it to Japan, and they improved it, and then they exported it. But that runway ran out in about 1990, or the mid-90s. From that point on, Japan had to do like Britain, like France, like the United States. They had to do high-cost innovation. So high-cost innovation, what is that? High-cost innovation means not only that you adapt technologies, but you create new markets. So these, if you don't mind me picking this up, these mobile phones, Steve Jobs, when he invented the mobile phone, the smartphone, not the mobile phone, the smartphone, when he invented the smartphone, what did he do? He created a new platform that did not previously exist, right? And when you do that, what you do is you create opportunities for many, many, many other people to come in and create new products and services. Now, India isn't at that point yet, but it will be. 10 years ago, China was not at that point yet, but it is today. If you look at what's happening with lithium batteries and EVs, this is going to change the world. In 150 years, we'll talk about the nuclear age, and we will talk about the lithium age. We'll talk about the battery age. Because the way that battery technology is developing at the moment, just as an aside, we'll soon have cars that have so much battery capacity that we will no longer need charging stations. Everybody at the moment is worried, oh, if I buy an EV, I'll never be able to charge it. Well, that's true if the range is only 100 or 200 kilometers. But when the range goes above 1,000 kilometers, you don't need a charging station. You drive it, you come home, you plug it in. You drive it for a long time, you come home, you plug it in. So no charging stations, no petrol stations. Here's another thing to think about. If everybody has an EV and they're plugging it in, do we need nuclear? We don't. Because what it means is the country has an enormous installed base of batteries that are at every single home. So when it stops, when the wind stops blowing, and when the sun stops shining, in India you have a lot of sun. But you also have nighttime as well. So it does stop shining. Sometimes I ask myself, does it ever stop shining? But it does, it stops shining. When the sun stops shining, you'll have a fleet of electric vehicle batteries in India that will keep everything going. So will we need nuclear? We might not need nuclear. Will we need coal? We might not need coal. So there's big questions to be answered around this going forward. And I think that in some respects, India's pathway is going to be more difficult than China, because China has already occupied so much of global manufacturing. But you have one huge advantage, and that is the English language. Your accessibility to knowledge, if your education system works well, is vastly superior to what it is in China. Most Chinese people do not speak English. This is why I speak Chinese. Do I need to learn Hindi? Probably not. I can probably get by without it because so many people in India speak English. This makes a very big strategic difference to the development of India over the next 20, 30 years. But it also, to come back to the topic of the day, it also means that the strategic opportunities associated with higher education are so much more important in India than they are perhaps in any other country at this point in time. Question over here. It's great, the questions are all coming. Can I just make a gender observation, if I may? This morning, when I was with the students, it was only the women that asked questions. And now, this afternoon, it wasn't that right. It was only the women that asked questions, and the boys all sat there like this. There's something about so I have 2 girls and a boy. When my girls were about 2 or 3, they spoke in full sentences. They spoke in full sentences. When my boy was about 5, he said, fish, fish, truck, truck, truck. So there's something about the communication style of men and women which is very different. And this is a good example about how men mature more slowly than women, but when they do start talking, they don't stop. Anyway, off you go.
That's good. So you have experience and exposure regarding LMS because we are talking about the new changes that are to be considered for the.
So learning management systems.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you use Moodle? What do you use?
We don't. We go with the conventional way of evaluation and.
Oh, so you use paper. You have a paper-based system.
Yes.
You don't use Moodle. No.
So
Okay.
can you elaborate about the advantages and this is an upcoming thing in India, of course.
All right. Absolutely. So I thought that you had Moodle, or I thought you had an online learning system, but you do everything on paper, do you? Okay. So the good news. Sorry, I'm so deaf. If you do.
Government of India, yes, started 10 years back. We have that MOOCs,
Okay.
online courses.
You have open
learning.
source. No, I
Yes.
understand that, but you were talking about learning management systems
Yeah.
within the university. So
Yeah.
within the university, you don't have an LMS system. Is that right? In the university. Okay. So that is very interesting. And you may feel that you are a bit slow. You may feel that way. I can see some people laughing. Where's the Vice Chancellor? Problem is he's got no money, right? So just give him a break. Give him a break. There's good news. There's good news that you're probably not expecting. Because you have waited, LMS systems like Moodle are now much better than they were 10 years ago. Sometimes being the first is not a good thing. So that's the good news. You've waited, and Moodle is now a lot better than it was before. And you should implement it. I think you should. And you should implement it across the university so that you get a standard. But before you implement it, you need to go and do some benchmarking. You need to look at other universities. And I think you should go outside India. I think you should go to the UK, you should go to Australia. Go to the other English-speaking countries where it's easy. I mean, you could go to France, have a nice time in Paris, and it could be fun. But I wouldn't do that. I would go to other English-speaking countries, maybe Malaysia as well. If that's another place you could go, and see how they've implemented it before you implement yours. That's the first thing I'd say. Now, the other thing, and this is, I have to choose my words carefully with this. Digital technology is a two-edged sword. There's a famous economist called Solow who said, we read all about productivity gains related to IT, and it's everywhere except in the economic statistics. What this means is the following. It means that you can implement LMS and it looks like a productivity gain. But if it is badly implemented, it actually creates more work for everybody. Now, I need to be careful about this, so I choose my words carefully. Normally in a university, the teaching and the marking and the assessment responsibilities lie with the departments. If a student fails, the lecturer goes to talk to the head of department and they say, what should we do? And then they figure something out. They exercise their judgment. Sometimes they do it badly, in which case the dean then has a problem. But most of the time, the lecturer and the head of department solve the problem. And the vice chancellor never hears about it. And the system works. The problem with the digital LMS system is that all the grades go in the system. And then that means that there's somebody that's appointed centrally who is watching all the results. And that becomes a job of enormous responsibility. And they don't want to make mistakes. So the next step is they start to issue rules and regulations. Now, I don't need to talk to Indians about rules and regulations. You guys... Well, I'm just saying that rules and regulations, whenever you get centralization and digitalization, you get rules and regulations. And again, it becomes disempowering. It means that if a student fails a class, it's not just a quick conversation between the teacher and the head of department and maybe an interview with the student to fix the problem. Then people all the way up the line, the dean, the principal, the deputy vice chancellor education, who probably has a team of 40 or 50, they all get involved. And the result is catastrophic. The lecturer says, I am never going to fail a student ever again. Because it's too much trouble, right? So when you implement a digital LMS system, just be very careful. It can raise your productivity, but don't allow it to disempower the decision-making authority or undermine the governance structure within your departments. Because if you do, then you will have very annoyed faculty and your standards will slip. And I'm embarrassed to say that I have seen this happen in a lot of universities. So LMS, yes, Moodle, yes, but pay very close attention to how it impacts your quality control and how it impacts the administrative load that you put on your faculty. Because remember, faculty need to be excellent at teaching and they need to be excellent at research. And your job as an administrator is to make their administrative load as small as possible, not increase the administrative load. And very sadly, a lot of universities at the moment are going under. They are literally failing as I speak because the administrative load has become ridiculous. And a lot of it has been because of productivity initiatives associated with digital software packages like LMS systems. So do it, but do it carefully, is what I would say. And use your common sense. Use your common sense. Maybe got time for one more question? Two more questions? There we go. I'm expecting this will be a marketing question.
Not exactly, sir. Sir, you said about the ranking part it works to a certain extent there.
That is a marketing question.
Could be. Could be used benchmark. The thing is, just now you said about the teaching excellence and the research excellence.
Ah.
But in most of these ranking that is worked out, probably the emphasis is more on the research part, the innovation, the classroom teaching, the student feedback, and the performance of the teacher in the class. I don't think that is given much importance. And the age-old kind of traditional teaching, I think it has taken a back standing.
Yeah.
And you've given more importance to the other things except for the classroom performance.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
I think that is a terrific comment, and sadly, I think you are right.
Thank you, sir.
Sadly, I think there's a lot of publishing that goes on that really has no impact. And the other problem with the way that we're doing research at the moment, and I think in India you're better at this in some respects, is that the research cycle time is geared to conferences and it's geared to special editions of journals, which is what you need in order to publish. But there's another aspect to research, which is consultancy. So academics have an obligation to develop knowledge, but they also have an obligation to develop knowledge which is useful for society. Remember what I said earlier about clusters? So a lot of universities have this debate about whether or not academics should be doing private consulting work outside. My personal view is that you should be. Now, as a marketing professional, you should be advising companies on their marketing strategies. You shouldn't have your own private marketing empire, but every now and then, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, you should be going in and helping a real company solve real marketing problems. Same thing goes for engineering faculty. They should be going and helping engineering companies solve real engineering problems. Because if you can't do that, what hope have you got of training your students to become valuable members of society, to balance the growth equation that I was talking about earlier? So as I said earlier, I think rankings have become a strategic obsession for university leaders. And yes, I think it is important, and yes, it does help marketing, it does help people choose universities. If a university is known as top 10 or top 20 or something, that helps. But what is really important is the prosperity of the community around the university. That's where you get the funding in order to keep the buildings new, to hire the best talent, that's where the value is. And last week I spent a few days at the IITH, Hyderabad, and I met the director, Professor Muti, right? And I went through the campus and he said, oh, that building was donated by the Birla Group, this building was donated by Tatars, we have a spectroscopy lab. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, what's really interesting here is that, and I don't know if it's still the case, but the IITs appear to operate on a business cycle that is attuned to the needs of industry. So again, coming back to this idea of PhDs and conferences and so on, this is a 12-month cycle time, or to get a paper published, it's 3 years. 3 years to get it published. If you do outside consultancy, normally you work for 1 month because the business wants an answer within 1 month, maybe 3 months, but not longer than that. So universities, I think they need to pay attention to this. If you want to engage with industry, you need to allow your faculty to have a cycle time, a turnover time, that is in sync with what industry needs. And if you do that, it creates a different reputational effect, because they say, he did a project for us, he was really good. let's ask him if he's got a student that could come and work for us, or a graduate that could come and work for us. So you bypass the whole rankings thing and you end up creating a local reputational cycle. And I think in many instances, those kinds of effects have been neglected, and that's a pity. So keep up the good work. Another question at the back.
Sir, you said in the race to become a superpower, how China became a superpower and India is on the path. But I want to ask you, sir, what about the intellectual property rights, copyrights violations? We are borrowing the designs or stealing the designs from Western countries, and we are progressing. We are flying on borrowed feathers.
So I don't advocate theft. No, I'll just say that before I start. But as I was telling some students this morning, you know, modern mathematics, the origins were in Gujarat. You know, in the West we talk about Arabic numerals. We talk about zero. We thought it came from the Arabs. It actually came from your predecessors. They weren't Indians then. They were whatever they were back in those days. It went to the Middle East. Then it went to the Middle East. It went to Europe. The United States, when it industrialized, how did they do it? Well, they took technology from Great Britain in the 1800s. There was no copyright. There were no patents in America until, I think, probably into the 1900s. China has done the same thing. The way that China did it is kind of interesting, and I'll summarize this for you because I wrote a paper on it once. When China opened up in the 1970s, the first thing they did was they went overseas and they bought manufacturing lines. They bought factories. And they brought them back to China. Black and white television factories, that sort of thing. They set them up and then they tried to run them. And it was a disaster. Because they had the hardware, but they didn't have the software. And the Communist Party members, there were big debates. Why is it that we have the infrastructure, but we can't make it work? So there were these long papers that were written, which I read and I wrote about. In the early 1980s, they started opening special economic zones. And here was the deal. If you came to China, if you were a foreign investor, you came to China, you brought your technology, you brought your people, but you had to do it in a joint venture with a Chinese company. So what did that do? It facilitated technology transfer. And that went for a while. Most Western countries, most OECD countries, they gave them their old technology. A bit like what happened in India. They give them their old technology. But things really started to change in the 1990s. Because they got rid of the joint venture requirements and they said, you can do wholly foreign-owned investment in China. So you can have your own businesses in China. So what did that mean? It meant that foreigners invested in China because they wanted access to that market, 1.4 billion people, which gives you economies of scale. It gives you experience effects. It gives you all of these wonderful things. But they did one thing that India hasn't done yet. They made it very easy for foreigners, foreign experts, that was the term that they used. They made it very easy for foreign experts to live in China. They made it possible to get a visa to go to China. So if you think about me, I moved to China when I was 23. I never ever had a problem with Chinese immigration for the duration of the time that I was there. I never had a visa rejected. I never had a visa delayed. I never even had to pay any money for the most part, maybe $100 here and there for a visa fee. Talk to a foreigner now about how easy it is to get a visa to India. For this trip alone, Monash University had to pay $800 for me to get my visa to come to India. So So India is still a bit closed. So you get the hardware, which there are patents, there's lots of protection on the hardware, but the software, the skills, the capabilities, there's no patents on that. These are all soft skills. You need them in order to grow. But if your immigration system is closed, well, then your people have to go to America, Australia, UK. Your best people have to leave in order for them to learn. So I don't know what's going to happen in India, but my suspicion is that in the next 10 years or so, you will change your immigration system. And you will start to see far more foreigners working in Hyderabad and other cities. And when that happens, you're going to get a lot of knowledge transfer, a lot of capabilities are going to come. You're going to have foreigners working at this university. This trip that we had to the IITH, most of the conversation was about how do we get foreign professors to come and teach at the IITH. It's this kind of thing that still needs to happen. And frankly, the patents and the IP and the theft, all of those things, it happens. It's part of the process. But this is only a small part of human capital. The biggest part of human capital is the software. It's the human element. And to get that transfer, you need to have people working together. But fantastic question. Terrifically important. Another question over here. Fantastic.
So in previous decades, knowledge is mostly generated in universities or contained there, isn't it?
I'm going to come closer because I'm so deaf, it's not funny.
In previous decades, knowledge was mostly generated in universities or people were trained there compared to the industry. But in recent decades, industry or private players are also producing equal or even more amount of knowledge, right? So where does university stand?
Good, very good question.
I have a follow-up question too.
All right, what's your follow-up question?
Yeah, we always talk about industry readiness of the students graduating from universities. And which industry are we talking about? Industry of today or tomorrow? In yesteryears, industry, there is a breakthrough every decade or 15 years. Now, it progresses so rapidly that you see changes every year or two. So how do you balance both of these?
Yeah, so very good question. All right, so your starting assumption was that it's universities that generate knowledge and industry that commercializes knowledge. I don't entirely agree. And part of the reason why I don't agree is actually proven by your next statement, which is now that universities feel like they're behind industry because industry is so far ahead. What universities do is that they prepare people for work, mostly. You do some research as well, but most of what you do is you prepare people for work. When I look back to my undergraduate studies, which were at a good university, I learnt a certain amount. I learnt to analyze and I learnt to communicate. But where I really got trained was when I started working. And I think that that's something that we often overlook. We forget that in fact, businesses are as important, if not more important, as a source of education, as a source of training, than the university sector, than higher education. And this is why the link between businesses and the university is so important, because you want people who are ready for work so that when they get into the work environment, they can learn quickly. What universities need to do, therefore, is they need to watch what's happening in the work environment and they need to respond to it. They need to tailor their curriculums to meet what is required in the work environment. So everything I was talking about earlier, solution-centric learning. We need to start doing that in universities because that's what the private sector requires of fresh graduates when they come out. Now your second question, just repeat the second question again. Industry readiness for our graduates. Okay. I think probably the best way to make our students ready for industry is to have them working on industry problems. So what I mean by that is every year I have executives come in from industry and they present a problem to my classes and they say, we don't know what to do. Can you go and do some research to explain what we need to do in order to solve this problem? And the students usually come back after 8 or 9 weeks and they present a whole lot of results. Some of the results, some of the recommendations are really good. A lot of the recommendations are not that good. A lot of the recommendations are not that good. But there only needs to be one recommendation that is useful for that representative industry to feel like they've had a good experience, and then they come back again. What's important for the students is that they have the opportunity to see what is considered to be valuable knowledge. And that is a hit and miss operation in any circumstance. And so students need to understand that if they're going to be successful at solution-centric thinking, not all of their solutions are going to be successful, but they need to practice in the art of developing and presenting solutions to people. So pitching, to be ready for industry or ready for work, students need to know how to pitch ideas. Pitching is really, really important. And as I mentioned at the beginning, that is a different style of writing to the kind of writing that we typically train our students to perform in a university. We spend a lot of time trying to create our students or shape our students to be like us so that they are ready for research. The reality is only a very small percentage of our students should go on and do higher research. Most of them should go off and do other things. So there's a need for us to be more practical in the way that we assess and more practical in the way that we train our people. We should not be atheoretical. We should still be giving them the best theory, the best frameworks, but we should be directing that intellectual talent towards problems that industry is currently facing. And with that, we will gain the kind of rapport that we need to make progress. Question there. Ooh, we have a lady. An outlier. That's good.
Can you please emphasize on the impact of artificial intelligence in coming 20 years on higher education?
All right, so first of all, I think we'll all have a job. We'll all have a job, right? So let's not stress about that. I don't know about you, but the other day I tried to get ChatGPT to write something for me. It was terrible. It was absolute rubbish. It can be helpful at this point in time. Do I ever think that it is going to be good as a well-trained human brain? No. Do I think it's going to compete against badly trained human beings? Yes. Yes. And this is part of the competitive environment that we're now in. So, you know how it is, basic rule of strategy. If you're in competition against something or someone, do you fight it or do you use it? Right? So we need to think very carefully about how we encourage our students to use artificial intelligence in their courses. And I'm afraid to say that this is going to be quite challenging for a number of us because we use fairly antiquated approaches towards assessment. So for example, as I said in this morning's session, turn to page 361 of the textbook, answer questions 5, 6 and 7. If you operate that way in an AI-enabled world, you're dead. You don't have a job. But if you say, apply the Minto method to present a pitch on how to improve the efficiency of this business or on how to write a good creative novel, creative writing. Use the frameworks which I've given you in class and demonstrate that you know how to use them well. Well, then you have something that ChatGPT can't do. It's something that the student has to learn how to do on their own, because they have to demonstrate that they have mastered the use of those particular skills. And I think it's going to be that style of assessment that is going to become more dominant in the way that we operate. I think we will still be taking, for those of you who love exams, yeah, physics, maths, I think we'll still be taking exams in 20 years' time. I think that there's still, and I'm going to be controversial here, I think there's still a need for memorization. There are some things that have to be memorized to the point. Just think about me with the Duolingo trying to learn Hindi. Yeah, I'm using muscle memory to learn Hindi sentence structures. But what's interesting is that Duolingo is using artificial intelligence to understand where my weaknesses are. So Duolingo sends me problems that it knows I'm not good at, right? And that means that my learning curve is a lot more effective than it was before. So in some respects, we've come full circle to the very beginning of the presentation. The productivity gain that we need from universities in order to power our economy into the next phase, it's going to be helped along by artificial intelligence, but it's actually the human response to technology that keeps us human. That's the one it's that process which is going to raise productivity. It's that which is going to create a more wealthy and more vibrant society. So we can't put it back in the box. We've got to learn to live with it, a little bit like we learned to live with steam engines and cars and all the rest of it. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. Great things will be done with it.
Dr. Ed, here, right here.
Yes.
Yeah. I need a couple of directions and instructions from you with regards to the problems that the university like us, a very huge university, multidisciplinary, multi-faculty university, would you suggest that we do each and everything as a holistic institution, or do we try to, as you were mentioning that, for LMS, we do it in bits and pieces, experiment, and then expand it to the university as such? That is one question, and I have a couple of more questions to ask.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Shall we go with that one first?
One by one.
All right, so what should you do as a university? Well, as I said, that market that we have where we bring in our raw materials are our students, right? Now, there's a funny thing about education. Students are customers, but they're also products. Students are customers and products. Interesting, isn't it? Students are customers and products. Now, historically, India, like many other countries, knew that they needed factories to process young human capital, to turn them into valuable citizens. And so we created universities where the client that paid was not actually the student, it was the government. And we were a bit Marxist-Leninist about the way that we did it. We had big lecture halls. This is a small lecture hall. I'm talking big lecture halls. The professor comes with a piece of chalk. He's back to the stage, writing furiously. Right, I'm done. I'm gone. And then an exam at the end of term. Do you remember this? This was your experience, right? Lots of chalk, and if you caused any trouble, throw the chalk at you, right? The good old days. The good old days.
Nostalgic.
And what this did was it created lots of throughput. We call this, in manufacturing, we call this throughput. It's like breeding chickens. You get hundreds of chickens. Breed them through. And if some of them die on the way, doesn't matter. Just push them through, push them through. So we did this for a long time. Why? Because it was very productive. It was highly efficient. Highly efficient. If students dropped out at the end of the first year, who cares? There's another 3 more that want to come. The Americans did something a bit different. And I was confronted by this because my university, when I was an undergraduate, was a bit like what I just said. It's like breeding chickens. But my wife, who's American, she went to a liberal arts college. And she studied maths. But she also studied Chinese. She studied literature. She studied philosophy. She even studied diving. Diving, you know, jumping off boards into the water. She studied diving as part of her degree. When I heard this, I thought, Mickey Mouse American. But she actually got a better education than me. So when I was at the ITH the other day, we had a conversation with Professor Morty, and he said something that I thought was very interesting. He said, we are starting to change our curriculum in the IITH. You know about this, I can see you nodding your head. We are going to allow students who are studying engineering to do a class in anthropology, to do a class in literature. And I thought, this is not possible. Not at an IIT. This could never happen. And then he started talking about this university, Ashoka, which I gather is a university for rich kids. Is that right? If you've got a lot of money, you go to Ashoka. Is that true? Or am I wrong? Private university near Delhi, costs a lot of money to go there. Anyway, the point is that all of these Indians that have gone to America, some of whom have been very successful, I don't know. But I think what's happened is they have friends in the United States who had college experiences like my wife's. They've gone to Stanford, they've studied lots of different things. I don't know, but I suspect they have children. And they've sent those children to American colleges, which are quite broad in the undergraduate. I don't know, but I suspect there's been conversations between very successful Indian Americans who have a lot of money in their back pockets with the directors of the IITs and the Ashokas, but also the Tatas and the Birlas and the other people in India who have a lot of influence. And this is bringing about a change in the way that you manage your human capital. And there's a recognition that not all Indians are the same, just like not all Americans are the same. And that different people need different pathways through university. And you know what? You can be a fantastic physicist if you have read some literature, if you have done some anthropology. Oh, and can I also say that if you invite a physicist to have dinner with you, it could be quite boring, or an engineer, could be quite boring. But if they've studied a little bit of Tagore and a bit of Shakespeare, well, at dinner they might be more interesting. Do you see what I'm saying? So there is an appetite for a broader style of education. If I look back at my own degree, I'll be honest with you, I studied too much maths. I studied maths way beyond my ability. I should have stopped. I should have done first year maths, double maths in first year, that would have been enough. But I did it in second year as well. I shouldn't have bothered. I shouldn't have bothered. I should have done something else. And I think that recognizing that young people are diverse, it gives us a license to change the architecture within the university and think not only about throughput, but about the quality of the product, not when it comes in, but when it comes out. Not when it comes in, but when it comes out. You don't go to university to prove that you're smart. That's not why you go to university. You go to university to become smart. You go to university in order to develop your human capabilities. I saw it somewhere on campus. Somebody had written something about to reach your maximum human potential. That's why you go to university. So the design of the courses, and LMS will help you do this, should be flexible enough to take this into account.
Yeah, my second question is with respect to the diversity of the students and the faculty in the university. I'm talking about the internationalization vis-a-vis what inbreeding that we are having.
Inbreeding.
Yeah, inbreeding. That's the way we understand that most of our faculty members are Osmania graduates. So that's something that how do you see it? Yeah.
Wow, that's a hot topic. So this is a problem at a lot of universities. In Chinese, they call them liu xiaolai de suisheng. So people who went into Peking University, did their masters at Peking University, did their PhD at Peking University, became a professor at Peking University, and never went anywhere else. I mean, that's not my character. It's not my temperament. But many of you are very happy doing that. There are advantages in doing that, because many of you have relationships that go back 10, 20, 30 years. Your university is quite interesting. You know, people become principals, they become deans for 2 years, and then they go back to being professors. So this is quite extraordinary. This is almost like a family structure. I'm sure you have difficult conversations. I'm sure that there are moments that are difficult. But nevertheless, the social capital that you have here is vibrant. This is an intact organization. Other universities are full of people from many different countries, very often the case in Australia, UK, US. And yes, it brings diversity. But it also, there's a trade-off. If you have too much diversity, it can actually become more inefficient and more political. If you don't have enough diversity, it becomes too inward-looking. So you have to somehow strike a balance. And again, it's a question of what kind of culture do you want? What kind of culture works best for the social license that you have as the university? I don't have a simple answer for you on this. But I think that as India liberalizes its immigration system, you have an opportunity. And let me explain what that opportunity is. So in the early 1990s, when China first started opening up, they invited fresh graduates from the United States, from Britain, from Australia, from English-speaking countries, to go to China, and they would be paid a salary of $150 or $200 a month, right? They would get a visa to live in China for 1 year. They would get a flight home. They would get accommodation, decent accommodation, hot water, cold water, and food, and pocket money of $200 a month. And thousands of English-speaking foreigners, they went to China like I did when I was 23, and they worked in Chinese universities. And it was a fantastic deal, because the Chinese universities got some young foreigners in, easy to handle because they're very junior. They're not professors, they're very junior. You know what I'm saying, right? The only risk is that they might fall in love with one of their students, but that's another problem, right? The foreigners got a great deal because they learned Chinese. That's what I did. I learned Chinese. And that meant that I had a very good career in China afterwards. So that was a win-win situation. China got lots of young, cheap human capital, brought it in, used it in the university. These students were, these people had just graduated from uni, so had all sorts of ideas, lots of cross-fertilization, and then they left. I think you should try that. I think you should try that. I think you should try that a little bit and try it in different faculties.
Response, and I was just thinking that 5% or 10% of our population, be it student population or be it faculty population, we need to get fresh blood in, so that, because we have been thinking in the past 10 years about how to take formulating strategies, how to take university forward into the next century. When we hit the last century, we had a centennial plan that how we can become one of the best universities in India, as well as try to break that ceiling with respect to international rat race of getting rankings and all those things. Strategy wise, we were thinking about, and we have failed miserably because of various reasons of internationalization, although there is some kind of funding available and all such kind of things, but various reasons, including government clearance and all such kind of things, we are not able to do that. So my last question would be, you had been our guest for past 2 days, you have seen university, you have interacted with university faculty members, you have interacted with research scholars as well as with students, you understand the university little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. So my straightforward question is, if I, as my leader is sitting here under the leadership, if at all for the next 5 years, what should be our strategy to make the university reach the goals that we are trying to set up? Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of other ideas I've already given you, so I'm going to give you some additional ones. So first of all, a qualification. I like to tell people, if you've never been to India before and you arrive and you've been here 2 days, you're an expert. Because you don't know what you don't know, right? So after 2 days, you're an expert. Because you don't know what you don't know. After a month, you realize that you don't know anything. And after 1 year, you just give up. Because India is too big, right? And after you've lived your whole life here, you're thinking, oh, I just about understand how it works, right? So you're right. After 3 or 4 days here, I have clarity, absolute clarity. But everything that I say, you need to take it with a pinch of salt, all right? So the first thing I would do is I would look for the low-hanging fruit. And what I mean by this is invest in things that don't cost you a lot of money, but give you impact. And when I mean impact on the culture. So get those young foreign teachers in here, Peace Corps, voluntary service overseas, whatever they are, to come in and teach. And allow them to be creative in what they teach. Watch them closely, because they can't just run wild, but allow them to teach pretty broadly. I mean, I was at a medical university in China, but I taught a course on Western history and civilization, and the students loved it. So that's the first thing I do. It doesn't cost you very much money, but it sends a signal to the faculty, and it sends a signal to the students that this is an institution that is open to change. The second thing I would do is I would understand the appetite amongst your students for going overseas. Now, many foreign universities will offer you 2+2 programs or 3+1 programs. That might work for you. It might not. Another route is you say, we will send students to another country, you can do it to Monash or anywhere else, and they go for 1 semester as part of their degree. They don't get a Monash degree, what they get is a Monash experience, and as a result, Monash will charge, instead of charging, no, I'm going to get my lakhs wrong here, but instead of charging 16 lakh for 1 semester, they charge 8 lakh. Now, your degrees are 8 lakh for the whole degree, is that right? So basically, they get 1 semester abroad, which is roughly the same as the cost of the whole degree. If you do that, then you start to send lots of your students overseas for a 6-month period. And then they come back and they talk. Now, The thing about sending students overseas is that it's a little bit like exchanging hostages. Because they go there, they have to submit to a new system, and when they come back with ideas. So this is a way, if you have the young foreigners come here and teach, that's a bit of cross-fertilization. If you send your students to Australia or the US or Germany or whatever for 6 months, they come back, their minds will be on fire, comparing and contrasting what they've seen. The next step after that is you get your foreign partners to send students here for a semester. Now, historically in India, and I think this is a fascinating thing. Historically in India, you've done a lot of very good work training students from Africa. And quite a few of my Indonesian friends, for example, who studied medicine, have come to India to get trained in specializations. So India already has done quite well, even without trying very hard, in international student markets from people from developing countries. And I think that's something that you should continue to invest in for two reasons. The first reason is I think it alters the culture on campus, but the other reason is that when those people go back to their country, they have already become a little bit Indian. Even if they come from Tanzania or Australia or whatnot, if you're 23 or 21 or 22 and you live 6 months in India, you will never look at a chapati the same way ever again. It will change, you know, it will change the way that you relate. You become a little bit Indian. I don't look it, but I'm a little bit Chinese because I spent those early years. I'm a little bit Malaysian. So again, it's this cross-fertilization. It's these effects, they can be done in a way where you don't need to invest a lot of money, but you create social capital. And I think that's where I would be investing going forward. And invest in a way thinking that, you know, India eventually will become a very large, very open, very competitive economy. It might not happen for 50 years, but I reckon it'll happen in about 20 years. So those young people that you bring here aged 21, 22, and they go back, they're going to be not ambassadors for India and Osmania, but there will be a connection there that will feed you 10, 15, 20 years down the track. So there we go. Things that don't cost too much, but that move the dial on your education. And I think the other thing I quickly also say is that those young people that come to work here, maybe when they're getting their PhDs ready, they may go back to wherever they come from, but eventually they'll have a sabbatical. And then maybe they have a sabbatical and come back here. So it's a boomerang. There should be a return trip. All right, maybe one last question and then stop. We good?
Sir.
Going, gone. All right,
One question from my side, sir.
Oh yes, very
Yes,
good.
this side.
Oh, over there. Okay, thank you.
Sir, my question is, a lot of the Indian students are going abroad for either it may be to develop themselves or individually like that. Why not the Indian students have been retained by the Indian governments? Or what kind of measures or innovative measures has to be taken by the universities so that our students can work here only and they can prospect here? Thank you.
So let me just understand the question. So these are students who are going.
Yeah. Sir, my question is, the students are studying here and they are going abroad for the livelihood. Why can't we retain here only? What type of innovative measures we are supposed to take so that they can work here only?
Yes.
This is my question.
Okay, all right. So what measures do we need to take in order that we do not have a brain drain? That's what you're asking. What do we need to do in Hyderabad to make sure that graduates of Osmania don't just disappear and leave the country. And my answer to you is, some of them are always going to leave. They're going to fall in love. They're going to get a job that they can't do here in Hyderabad. That's always going to happen. And that's all right. That's okay. Because as long as you allow outsiders to come in, you lose some and you gain some. Also, when you lose some and you gain some, you improve the quality of the cluster around the university. And again, as I said earlier, this is the reason why the university exists. The university exists to create knowledge, but the university exists also to create a cluster of economic activity around it. And you are in a fantastic position in Hyderabad, because this is one of the most vibrant cities in India. I went to dinner with a friend of mine the other night who I knew when he was doing his master's degree in London. And when he came back to, he's from Assam. When he came back to India, he worked in Delhi. He hated it. Absolutely hated it. And then he got offered a job in Hyderabad. Fantastic. He wants to move to Hyderabad. That is the kind of response that you want. You are in competition with every other major city in India. You want to win that competition. I heard people discussing over the weekend Bangalore and Hyderabad. Now, I went to Bangalore the same time I came to Hyderabad 24 years ago. 24 years ago, I was a Bangalore man. If I had to choose, I would have been in Bangalore. I would not have been in Hyderabad. But today, I would want to be in Hyderabad. You have traffic jams, but they're not like traffic jams in Bangalore traffic jams. The whole world knows about the traffic jams. So it's quality of life, it's vibrancy of their local economy, it's the art scene, it's the music scene, it's literature, it's new businesses cropping up, it's intelligent government. It's a bureaucracy. We talked about the LMS system earlier. It's a bureaucracy or a digital system that doesn't impose additional costs on people, that actually enables them to perform at their potential. These are the sorts of things that you need to do in order to make Hyderabad, not just Osmania, but Hyderabad, quality place to live, where people want to live. And you know what, when that happens, the value of your house will go up. That will create a whole new set of problems, but we don't have time to discuss it now. Thank you.
I think you can do a better job by putting your hands together to appreciate the wonderful knowledge sharing that was done by Professor Edward Buckingham. It's really a great thing, sir. I would only tell that the greatest gift that you can give to someone is your time and sharing your knowledge, coming all the way and enlightening us. And you spoke a vast number of things about the drivers of economic growth, about leadership which is complex in universities and different style of leadership that you require. The emphasis on being student-centric and solution-centric thinking, and the way you said about ranking, and the way you answered the intriguing questions from the faculty speaks volumes about the depth of knowledge that you carry, sir. And above all, the kind words that you said for the city of Hyderabad and comparing it with the Silicon Valley that we have in Bangalore. Thank you very much for that. And we have a short felicitation to the guest speaker, Professor Edward Buckingham. We request our Vice Chancellor to do the honors along with the other members of the dais. One request, kindly don't leave away, because Sir has insisted that there would be photos separately as memories that we carry with Professor Edward. So first it would be the deans, then the directors, then the principal, then the heads. You'll come in the sequence there and take your pictures with Professor Edward and then leave. Thank you for that cooperation. May I request the coordinating team to help us with felicitating Professor Edward Buckingham. Small token of appreciation, sir, for the wonderful time that you've spent and shared your knowledge with us. Yeah, he was speaking very high about the buildings that we have in OU. He was comparing it with IITH, and he said he didn't come across, and he said if somebody's alive today, you won't come across building another arts college building, and he gets a replica of that. My God, he's a real polyglot around this. Yeah, today we don't have our official photographer Rajesh around. I request Raghupati sir and his team from the EMRC to help us out with photos. Raghu sir is here as well. May I request first the deans to come over to the dais here. Kindly help quickly. I know people are all waiting. It's past 5 o'clock there. But it was a spellbound session that we have. The deans, please. May I request four of you all to sit so that they can stand behind or. Kindly adjust yourself, especially the ones who are vertically challenged. Just allow him to go in. May I request the principals to come next. Kindly adjust. I think tall man is in front here. He's blocking the way. There are people shorter than you, sir. Kindly make way for them there. Yeah, yeah. He's standing tall like the arts college there. Make sure all are visible. Raghuana. Directors next, please. All the directors, kindly come over to the dais. Thank you so much to the principals. Raghu sir, you give your phone to someone. Come. May I request the heads of the department to come over? Okay. Yeah. Some would be small, some would be big then. You can go and stand front. That's it, that's it. Now we can go from here. Heads, heads. Don't stand, Anna. भाई वो साइड थोड़ा ये ऊपर रखो ना. Probably you'll have to stand on the bench there. Thank you. You have been a bit congested and not very comfortable there, but still for the memory's sake we have done it. May I request the UGC and non-UGC members to come over for a picture, and meanwhile, I request Lavanya ma'am to felicitate the speaker. Sir as well, Vice Chancellor sir. UGC and non-UGC, and meanwhile the felicitations as well. I'll call the EMRC team a little later because if they stop taking photos, no one will be there. So may I request our Vice Chancellor and Professor Edward to accept our floral bouquets from the UGC office and the non-UGC as well. Vice Chancellor, sir. Yeah, for the OSD as well. OSD, sir. Ma'am is generous, accepted. So if you can sit for a moment there, another picture or so. I request you all to kindly adjust according to your heights there, so that all are visible. Come. Okay, the EMRC team, somebody help them out with taking the pictures. Probably the MMTTTC can help them out in taking the pictures. Come, come, come. The EMRC team, quickly. Probably I went a little step ahead, sir. You said only 14, but they also wanted pictures. Shouldn't be mistook. Thank all the principals, heads, deans, and directors who have taken time out. I know it was a busy schedule. In spite of it, you have made it to this. Surely it's a day to remember and cherish for long the kind of inputs that we have received. And thanks, humongous thanks to our Vice Chancellor for arranging and taking chance out of the occasion. And the way he had gone about with coordinating, arranging it with for all the students of the various campus colleges. And especially we had a plan out to ensure that the inputs come to the directors, deans, principals, and heads. Thank you very much, sir. And thanks for the wonderful coordination that had come from Lavanya ma'am and her team in the dean development and all the unsung heroes, the non-teaching staff that I would put it always, from Sirisha ma'am's team and everybody else. Thank you once again. Great day ahead. See you all once again.
I would like to thank Patrick sir also for organizing this program successfully. Thank you once again.
అరే ఇవన్నీ తీసేసే సాధ్యం తీసేసా తీసేసే క్లాస్ లేదు ఆన్లైన్ అంటే ఈరోజు వీసీ హైయర్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ బయట నుంచి అడ్వాన్స్ బకింగ్హామ్ అని ఎక్కడ కాదు కాదు ఇదేమో హైయర్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ గురించి అది చెప్తాను ఫ్యూచర్ ఇస్ ఫర్ హైయర్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ ద ఫ్యూచర్ ఆఫ్ హైయర్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ చాడుండే వెళ్ళిపోయింది ఆయన చెప్తాను అంటే ఫోన్ చేయ తర్వాత సరే ఆయన బిజీగా ఉంటాడు ఆయన ఎక్కడ ఇప్పుడు ఆన్లైన్ క్లాస్ ఉంటుంది ఆరింటికి మళ్ళీ బాగా రమ్మని చెప్పండి ఫోన్లోనే ఏం వద్దులే ఇంటికి వెళ్తాను ఆయనకి కూడా వచ్చిందని అది 9 వరకు ఉంటుంది క్లాస్ మళ్ళీ మధ్యలో వెళ్తాను మొత్తం టచ్ టచ్ అన్నీ ఉండేది బోర్డ్ ఏదో ప్రాబ్లం సరేలే అది తగ్గుతుంది ఇంకా నయమన్నట్లు లేకపోతే రాజా సార్ అసిడ్కి ఫోన్ చేశారా చేయండి ఆయన ప్రోగ్రామ్ అంటే టీమ్స్ ఉన్నాయి కదా అంటే వచ్చే లైవ్ ప్రోగ్రామ్ అని వచ్చింది లేకపోతే రాడు తీస్తా ఒక్కసారి
ఇది ఎన్ని వీక్స్ ఉంటుంది
Uh,